Alabama and Texas. For a lot of people, the game of the week, College Game Day was there. Big noon kickoff was there. All of the juice across the noon kickoff slate, at least, was solely focused on Texas and Alabama. Alabama beats Texas narrowly 20-19. Texas pushed them to the absolute limit, and then after all of that, after Texas gives their best fight, Alabama still finds a way to get it done in the closing seconds. There's a couple of takeaways, though, that we got to take away from both these programs, starting with Texas. We talked about it earlier today, actually, on this channel. We do little shorter form videos to kind of get you ready, get you a little something to chew on after you get out of church on Sunday. But I was really impressed by the way Texas competed, and honestly, the way that they were able to throw punches at Texas. Because there were multiple times throughout this game where it would have been the easiest thing in the world for Texas to say, you know what, we put on a strong showing. That was about all we really had to do in this game. Vegas had us as 20-point dogs, and we still found a way to fight and cover that. And we show what we have talent-wise and all this, that, and the other. We'll get to more on that in a minute, but it would have been easy for Texas to throw in the towel. And that was never the case for this program. And a program that a lot of people, especially at the national level, like to say, well, Texas has a culture issue. It's in that locker room. They don't have that dog in them. They're selfish. They're all for themselves. That might have been the case a season ago. Fast forward from the Bo Davis moment on that bus and the way that he absolutely just reamed some of those players and let them know, hey, you're here or you're not, to paraphrase what he said. If you don't want to be here, get in the portal. And they revamped that entire locker room in a lot of ways. They competed with Alabama for 60 minutes. They gave them just about all they could handle. So talking about culture, they showed up. They showed up and they took all that Alabama threw their way and then gave it back to them. Now, the thing that I'm looking for, can they do it game in and game out? Can they do it next week? Because we saw across college football, Notre Dame in particular has a great showing against Ohio State. They go to Columbus. Similar standpoint. Big spread they got to cover. Nobody thinks they have a chance. They're up at half. They throw a right hook at Ohio State, and then the following week have a letdown lose to Marshall. Can Texas be mature enough? Is that culture far along enough to where they can not be impacted by whoever's across from them? Because, quite frankly, it's not difficult to get excited to play a team like Alabama. I don't think it's a stretch to say that that was, in a lot of ways, the biggest game on their schedule. I know Oklahoma is going to be a huge game. I know there's a lot of other games that have a lot of meaning to this Texas fan base, but there was a ton of excitement for Alabama to come to town. Anytime Goliath steps into the ring, you just have a little more adrenaline. And that's great. Like I said, they put on a strong showing. Quinn Ewers goes down. They still find a way to fight back and keep it a game, and they honestly push them to the very last play and then don't end up winning the game. How do you respond next week? How do you respond when you play Kansas, when you play West Virginia, when you play the teams that aren't underlined, circled, bold, and highlighted? What happens then? To be fair, Kansas may be a team that's highlighted given what happened last year and the revenge they're looking for, but you get what I'm saying here. You get where I'm coming from. Can Texas have enough maturity to still have this kind of intensity regardless of who they're playing? Something I'm watching for. In terms of the game flow itself, it's hard to not be excited about Quinn Ewers. At this point in time, I don't have any insight as to how long he's going to be out for. It sounds like it was a sprained clavicle, is a report that I thought I read somewhere. But as of right now, you pray and you hope that that injury is not season-ending for Quinn Ewers, because that offense was moving under him. And Nick Saban talked a lot about Hudson Card and all the things that he did extending plays, and I think that's very much true, but it's hard to argue against what Quinn Ewers did and what he brought to the table vertically in the pass game for Texas. Dropped one in the bucket to Xavier Worthy that really should have been a touchdown, went through Worthy's hands. Quinn Ewers led this game in passing into the mid-fourth quarter. There was a point where I think it was like 8 minutes left to go in the game, and Quinn Ewers, with 134 passing yards, is still the leading passer in the entire game for both sides. Some of that's a testament to the defenses, but as a whole, you look at Quinn Ewers and you say, wow, we might have had a shot with him. It kind of feels like Colt McCoy round 2 if you're Texas, last time they played Alabama. It has that feel to it, the whole what if Ewers had stayed in the game. And that's not to knock Hudson Card, did a lot of good things, was gritty as heck down the stretch for them. But you saw the vertical passing game be much more limited. And when that was limited, it allowed Alabama to rally up much more on the run. I don't want to do the whole woulda, shoulda, coulda here, but if Quinn Ewers is in the game, you're able to be more multiple offensively. And maybe, just maybe, that final score is different. On top of all this, though, you got to feel encouraged. You got to feel validated in terms of the talent you have in your locker room at Texas. Because that was another knock that people had made for probably years now, saying Texas recruits well, but what happens when they get there? They fall off the map, right? I think Garrett Wilson even said that. I had too many people that I knew from Austin that were good football players that went to Texas and never panned out. Garrett Wilson, a guy that obviously was from the Austin area, ends up going to Ohio State and cited that as the reason why he didn't go to Texas. I don't know if we were watching the same game yesterday, but there was a lot of talent on that field at Texas. There was a lot of talent in that burnt orange that showed themselves and showed their worth and showed their talent against Alabama. There was no overmatched nature of that game at all in terms of talent. There was no side that was just blatantly more talented than the other. And that sounds a little bit funny to hear because you look at Alabama and you look at all the jewelry that Nick Saban has and how well they've recruited and all the recruiting classes they have. But if you line them up like they did yesterday, I didn't feel like talent was the reason either team won or lost the game, to be 100% honest with you. Talent wasn't the reason why Alabama won yesterday. Alabama won yesterday because they were the more mature team, because they were the more experienced team, and to be honest with you, because they had number 9 on their team. That's why they won yesterday. We'll get to more of that in a minute, but I want to just finish with this. There's no moral victories here. I said that already on this show. There is no such thing as a good loss. There's no such thing as a bad win. But for Texas, if you're looking for some positives to take away from this game, I think there's a lot of them. That defense absolutely swarmed, made Bryce Young uncomfortable for the majority of the afternoon, challenged those receivers for Alabama really effectively, played really strong in the run game, really should have had a safety. That ref's car is 1,000,000% on some lot somewhere right now because it definitely got the Quinn Ewers treatment and got towed during the game yesterday because that safety should have counted and should have been 2 points for Texas. There's a lot to build on for Texas. There's a lot to be excited about. Can you do it week in and week out? Something I'm watching for and very interested to see how far along this culture is because that's going to tell us a lot about where they are as a program. Easy to get up for Alabama. Easy to bring your A game when Alabama comes to town. Can you do it next week when you're not playing Bama? When you don't have College game day on the scene? Something I'm watching for. For Alabama, it really did not feel like an Alabama kind of football game. And Nick Saban said as much in his post-game press conference. They did not look like the disciplined, elite caliber of program that we're used to seeing from Alabama. If I told you before the game, one of these teams will have 15 penalties for 100-plus yards, you'll say, man, that's too bad for Texas. Can't believe they played so undisciplined, but then again, I guess it is year 2 under Sark, and they have a culture issue, right? That's the whole thing. They have a culture issue at Texas. Then I said, no. It was Alabama. Alabama had 15 penalties for just around 100 yards. Whoa. That's not how Alabama gets down. Alabama doesn't get those offside penalties, those substitution penalties, those illegal procedure penalties, the false starts, all those things. And the crowd noise maybe contributes some to the false starts, but it doesn't contribute to offsides. It doesn't contribute to undisciplined late hits. That was shocking to me. I don't know how much stock you put into that, but it's just an interesting observation to say, I don't usually see that from Alabama. Offensively, I think you feel a little more concerned, not overwhelmingly concerned, but the wide receiver group for Alabama, we already knew, was a little more unproven than what they've had there. A little more of a, let's see what happens here. Let's see what we have under the hood here. And to Texas's credit, they played them extremely tough, but there was very little vertical presence for Alabama downfield. Texas was able, for the most part, just kind of pin their ears back, spy Bryce Young, and play well on the back end. They didn't really have to do a ton on the back end, to be honest with you. And that's not a knock against Alabama as much as it is, I think, a credit to Texas. But you still have to look at yourself in the mirror if you're Alabama and say, okay, what happens when we get to SEC play? What happens when we play Georgia in that SEC title game, if that's the way it shakes out? What happens then? Because we can't afford to be one-dimensional. Bryce Young is Bryce Young. He is the coolest customer in all of college football. Dude has an S on his chest, is the reason they won that game yesterday. But what happens when we can't just depend on that? What happens when we don't have the luxury of just letting him cut it loose and win the game for us? They have to have something vertical. Whether it's Trayshawn Holden stepping up, whether it's Jermaine Burton stepping up. We saw Ja'Cory Brooks do some good things, but they don't have that burner in Jamison Williams like they did a year ago. And as a result, we saw Texas, like I said, be able to play really tough in the box with them. I was surprised they didn't feed Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more. I think he probably needs to see a little bit more of the football from Alabama. He's probably the best player on your roster that's not wearing number 9 or 31, so the best player on your offense that's not wearing number 9. But as a whole for Alabama, I think you definitely have a little more motivation after hearing all offseason how it's going to be you and Ohio State in the national title game. You now get brought down to earth just a little bit. So the thing that I'm watching for, is this a wake-up call for Alabama, or is this who they are? I would be surprised if it's who they are. I would be surprised if this is really just the undisciplined Alabama team that has to find a way to win in the final seconds because of what they don't do well protecting Bryce Young and what they don't have downfield. That would surprise me. But men lie, women lie, tape don't lie. And Bryce Young was uncomfortable for the majority of the afternoon, had to go superhero mode to win the game for Bama, and the DB play wasn't great either. I mean, how many times did we see Texas test and test and test a Kool-Aid McKinstry downfield, a number of these corners downfield, and get either a PI call or they would win the route? Multiple times we saw that. That can't be the case going forward for Bama to get to where they ultimately want to be. So we'll see what happens, but Bama was not playing Alabama around the football yesterday. And if Bryce Young's not on that sideline for the Crimson Tide, I don't know if that final score is the same as it looks right now. But all to say, Bama finds a way to get it done. Because great teams do that. Great teams find a way to win, and they win on the road, and they win ugly. And Alabama wins ugly yesterday against Texas, 20-19. Great game, though. I mean, the atmosphere was awesome. It was cool to see DKR rocking and a fan base that catches a lot of flack nationally about not necessarily filling out their stadium and being fair weather fans and this, that, and the other. Really cool to see the atmosphere yesterday and to see them respond to the call to action to pack out DKR and to be a factor in that game. I mean, we saw it. There were false starts that happened because of that crowd noise. So credit to them. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.